أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Continuing with our discussion on Āyat al-Kursi, we reached this statement: وَسَعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. His seat embraces the heavens and the earth. There is a big difference between arsh and kursi. That's why we use the term throne for the arsh and seat for kursi. Although both may be used by a king, they are utilized for two different positions of authority or audience. I mean, sometimes think about the old kings. Nowadays, of course, we don't have such an arrangement, except in very few countries. Think about the old kings. When they had a sort of very huge audience, they sat on their throne. And sometimes to climb on the throne, they needed a footstool so that they put their feet on that and climb on the throne. That footstool was called kursi. And also, sometimes when the king was not having a big audience and just was talking to a circle of his courtiers, he sat on a special chair, and that was kursi as well. Now, this is a good sort of comparison to compare the arsh and kursi. We may say that arsh is that very big throne on which the king sits when they want to somehow enforce their authority to a wide audience. And kursi is the smaller sort of seats on which they sit when, for example, they talk to their ministers. Or we can say that the sort of comparison between arsh and kursi, the relation between arsh and kursi is that kursi is that footstool on which the king rests his feet when he climbs the throne. So in this sense, kursi must be much smaller than arsh, and the throne is bigger than the seats. Although they both refer to the position of authority, however, they refer to two different authorities, as we will explain later on. So generally, a king's throne or seat represents his authority. Whether we talk about kursi or we talk about arsh, they both refer to the authority of God. And authority, as we will see, may mean other things as well. Inshallah, we'll discuss it. Hence, arsh and kursi signify two different levels of authority of God. His seat embraces the heavens and the earth is a metaphoric reference to God's universal dominion, power, absolute control, and authority related to the creation, related to the heavens and the earth. And then we have a higher authority, which is above this, which controls the kursi, which creates the kursi, which makes the kursi work, and that is arsh. And that's why he's Rabbul Arsh al-Azim. That's why everything emanates from arsh, comes to kursi, which is actually embracing the heavens and the earth. Since the discussion was about God's knowledge as well, you remember it said, wilāytullāh bishay'in min ilmihi illā bimā shā'a. They cannot comprehend, encompass anything of his knowledge except what he wills. Therefore, his seat might also be a reference to his knowledge, ilm, from which nothing escapes. And as you know, asmā'ullah are just references to different aspects of one essence. They are not different from each other, but they are the essence looked at from different perspectives. And therefore, when we talk about his authority, we talk about his knowledge as well. Now, listen to this hadith. Hafs ibn Ghiyath reports, I asked Imam al-Sadiq about his seat embraces the heavens and the earth. وَسَعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. I asked about this statement. He said his knowledge. Now, in certain narrations, we have that Kursi is a reference, a metaphorical reference to his authority, because the king's orders are issued from the Kursi, from the throne. This is metaphorically we say, isn't it? This has come from the throne of the king, for example. Why it is in other narrations it's explained as his knowledge? Because they are identical. Here, in this case, Kursi refers to the active knowledge of God. You know, our knowledge is always passive. We have to wait for things to happen, or the processes which enable us to predict something, because of course the course of events, so that our knowledge is materialized. So in any case, we have to wait for things to happen until we know them. What about God? Does God need to wait for things to happen so that he knows them? Or he knows them, and as a consequence of his knowledge, they happen? Think about this carefully. This is a very, very delicate matter. We never should compare God with ourselves. We never should be trapped in the snares of anthropomorphism. That's how why sometimes people ask, if God knows what is the destiny of everyone, what will happen eventually to everyone, then what's the point of creation, waiting until everything happens, then the paradise and hell? That is anthropomorphic understanding of God. God doesn't wait for things to happen so that he knows them. Because he knows them, they happen. Active knowledge, this I call. Look at this verse in Surah An'am, وَعِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ لَا يَعْلَمُهَا إِلَّا هُوَ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وما تسقط من ورقة إلا يعلمها ولا حبة في ظلمات الأرض ولا رطب ولا يابس إلا في كتاب مبين. With him are the treasures of the unseen. No one knows them except him. He knows whatever there is in land and sea. Now look at this part. No leaf falls without his knowing it. Does it mean knowing it after it falls? Or knowing it before it falls, or falling because he knows it? And therefore here we have the two concepts of authority and knowledge merging into each other. And therefore we can say Kursi is a metaphorical reference to knowledge of God, or a metaphorical reference to the authority of God. In effect, God's knowledge is his will. His will is his creation. His creation is his authority. Authority is not separable from creation. That is why we have in Hadith, Imam al-Raza alayhi salam said, Alima wa sha'a wa arada wa qaddara wa qadra wa amda. Now, this is actually a mental analysis of the process of creation. However, they are all identical. It doesn't actually wait for a time, or we cannot separate them from each other in Allah. In us, yes, we have to know something. For example, we know that there is a beautiful scenery in Africa, say in Kenya, for example. Then after knowing it, I want to visit it. The desire comes to me And I would like to visit that river. But of course, it's just a desire. Then in a holiday, I decide, I will, irada, I decide to go and visit that river. So it's first knowledge, then desire, wish, and then will, and then qaddara. Then I have to measure. How much money do I have? How long can I stay? Which airplane I have to take? And so on and so forth. How many of my children I can take with me? Things like that. This is taqdeer. And then comes the command. I command the travel agency, I want to buy this holiday for this period, and then it's implemented. So it's knowledge, wish, will, measuring, and assessing, and then commanding the whatever should be commanded, and then implementation. For Allah, we analyze His knowledge and mashiyah and irada and taqdeer like that. However, they are all identical. They all happen instantaneously. Especially taqdeer is very important. Destiny, isn't it? Destiny, measuring. Inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu biqadar. We have created everything with taqdeer. It means we have measured everything. When Allah wants to create human being, He measures what He needs in terms of body, soul, provision, everything, and what time, on what planet, and all these things. But these, for Allah, they do not need time, thinking, thought, calculation, nothing. It all happens at once. And therefore, that's why I said His ilm and His irada are the same thing. Here is another hadith. He knew, then he wanted. This is the meaning of hadith. He knew, then he wanted, then he willed, then he measured, destined, then he decreed, then he implemented. Imam al-Raza alayhi salam, in another hadith, he says, Inna Allah idha sha'a shay'an aradah, wa idha aradahu qaddarah, wa idha qaddarahu qadah, wa idha qadahu amdah. When Allah wants something, He wills it. When He wills it, He measures or destines it. And when He destines it, He commands it. After He commands it, He implements it. So, and there's something very interesting. The difference between qaza and imza. Decree and command and imza. Because Allah has given a dimension to His creation, which is time. Do not think that He is affected by time at all. He's sitting outside the time. He's the creator of time. There are certain wrong questions that sometimes we ask. When did Allah start to create? Well, Allah created the time with His creation. The question of when is senseless. It is a wrong question. Or where is Allah? Allah has created the space. Where? So it's a wrong question to ask, where is Allah? He is nowhere. When we say nowhere, it doesn't mean that He's not present everywhere. But you cannot place Him in place. Now, Allah has given this time dimension. So when He decrees, for example, He decrees that I have to die, say, for example, end of Ramadan. God forbid. Or maybe He wills it. Whatever God wishes, we are happy with it. Okay? So the decree has come. The decree has come. But because I have a time dimension, the implementation waits for that time. Not the decree, the implementation. Can the qada be averted? Yes. In Sahifa Sajjadiyya, in one of the du'as we have, وَأَسْأَلُكَ بِقَضَائِكَ الْمُبْرَمِ. I ask you by your firm decree, الَّذِي تَحْجُبُهُ بِأَيْسَرِ الدُّعَى, that you stop it with the slightest dua. because the time of implementation hasn't come. Things may be destined for us on Laylatul Qadr for a year. Can we somehow change them? Yes, we can change them with dua, with action, with other things. But don't think that it is affecting the decision of God. It's because the time of implementation hasn't come, and Allah is, of course, his hands are not tied because of his the destiny that he has destined or the decree that he has issued. No, he can actually change things if our situation changes. Anyhow, that was just a digression from the main topic. What I wanted to say is that if we find, for example, the arsh is knowledge of God, or the arsh is authority of God, or the place when he issues decrees, they're all the same thing. Now, some have imagined, coming back to the discussion that we have, some have imagined the seat and the throne of God in literal sense, due to their anthropomorphic understanding of God, thinking that, of course, throne is a huge, huge thing above the seventh heavens. And the same thing with the Kursi and seat. The anthropomorphists have also understood it literally as a place where God sits. Don't we have in the Quran, Ar-Rahman al-arsh istawa? Ar-Rahman is settling on the throne, and they think this is a literal statement. They do not actually take it metaphorically. Now look, amazingly, Fakhruddin al-Razi, with all his acumen and intellect, he says something according to the Ash'ari understanding of Kursi. Fakhruddin al-Razi says that it is given in correct reports that the Kursi is a huge body under the arsh and above the seventh heavens. Seventh heavens, okay, if we take it physically, because seven heavens may be layers of malakut rather than, and so the first dunya is, sama'ud dunya is what we live in, and then above that there are 7 other layers of metaphysical spaces. But even if we say these refer to 7 physical heavens, for example, it says that it is above that and under arsh. And this is the exact phrase he uses, وَأَلَمْ أَنَّ لَفْظَ الْكُرْسِي وَرَدَ فِي الْآيَةِ وَجَاءَ فِي الْأَخْبَارِ الصَّحِيحَةِ. So the term Kursi, which has come in the ayah, and of course in correct sound hadith, it has come that أَنَّهُ جِسْمٌ عَظِيمٌ تَحْتَ الْعَرْشِ وَفَوْقُ السَّمَاءِ السَّابِعِ. Below the arsh, above the 7th heaven. He then goes on to offer other metaphorical meanings for the Kursi, such as authority, sultan, power, qudra, dominion, mulk of God, or God's knowledge, because it is the seat of the all-knowing. So, mulk, qudra, sultan, ilm, these are different terms used, different concepts used to describe the Kursi, but then he goes back to the literal meaning and says, ignoring the apparent meaning without proof is impermissible. Ya Shaykh al-A'zam, Ya Fakhruddin al-Razi, Ya Mufassir al-Kabir, what proof bigger you want to have than the idea that God does not have a physical existence? And when he refers to Arsh and Kursi, he refers to metaphysical things, not to physical things. So this is amazing. However, most Muslims and the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt in particular have insisted that God has no physical form, nor can he be confined to a fixed place or ascribed any limitation, such as being bound by time and space. Imam al-Rida described him as he is not in anything or above anything. لا في شيء ولا على شيء. So that is clear. The traditions from Ahlul Bayt tell us that the whole creation is in the Kursi. And the Kursi is inside the arsh, and arsh is carried by God. Now, look at the difference of knowledge between what we hear from Fakhruddin al-Razi and other commentators, thinking that Kursi is somewhere above heavens and the earth, and the knowledge which comes from Ahlul Bayt, saying that every creation is in the Kursi. وَسَعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضِ. How do they think that the Kursi is somewhere below the arsh and above the seven heavens, while Allah says his Kursi embraces the heavens and the earth? So the traditions from Ahlul Bayt tell us that the whole creation is in the Kursi, and the Kursi is inside the arsh, and arsh is carried by God. Here are some of those narrations. From Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, that Abu Dhar asked, O Apostle of God, what is the best of that which has been revealed to you? He said, the verse of the seat, Ayat al-Kursi. The seven heavens and the seven earths in the seat are but like a ring thrown in a vast open space. Wow. Imagine the whole creation, not only the physical creation, metaphysical creation, the world of angels, the seven heavens of angels, where the angels reside, which belongs to Alam al-Malakut, which is much, much bigger than our universe. Then think about the universe and put all these together. They are just like a small ring placed in a huge desert, and that huge desert is Kursi. So how big is the Kursi? How small is the creation compared to it? Then he said, and surely the excellence of the throne, arsh, over the seat, the Kursi, is like that of the open space over the ring. That means, imagine the Kursi and the whole creation, a small ring in a huge desert. Then the Kursi in the arsh is like that small ring in that big plain, big desert. How big is the arsh then? And these are all creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This hadith shows that his seat embraces the heavens and the earth, mean it extends beyond them and encompasses them fully, rather than just to mean it is as wide and vast as they are in the spatial sense. From Imam al-Sadiq, another hadith, everything which Allah has created is in the receptacle of the seats, except his throne, because that is too great for the seat to encompass. Now then we have to certainly see what is the difference between the throne and the seat, between arsh and kursi. Zurara asked Imam al-Sadiq, now this is very interesting because this is a very strange question, not expected from someone with the caliber of Zurara, alayhi rahmah. He said, he asked about wasa kursiyyuhu as-samawati wal arsh, his seat embraces the heavens and the earth. Whether the heavens and the earth encompass the seat, or if the seat extends over the heavens and the earth. He replied, indeed, everything is in the seat. Now, the question seems counterintuitive because the Quran says, wasa kursiyyuhu as-samawati wal arsh, and then he asked, does his seat embraces the samawati wal arsh, heavens and the earth, or the heavens and the earth embraces the kursi? What question is this? Now, Allah Ta'ala explains this. He has commented on this tradition, saying, in many traditions, the same point has been emphasized in reply to similar question. This question looks strange because nobody has ever recited the verse in a way which could justify such confusion, as I mentioned. He continues, apparently the questions were based not on the recital of the Quran, because no one recited the Quran differently, وَسَعَ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ كُرْسِيُّهُ, but on the common understanding that the seat was a particular body kept over the heavens and over the seventh heaven. And from there, the affairs of the material world were managed. Because of that misconception, the verse didn't make sense to them, you know? Instead of correcting their misconception by the verse, they try to interpret the verse wrongly to match that misconception. That being the picture of the seat in their minds, it was reasonable to suppose that the heavens and the earth encompassed the seat because it was placed over the heavens and the wooden, as a wooden or iron chair is placed over the floor. And that gave rise to the question as to why the Quran is said, instead of saying, وَسَعَ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ كُرْسِيُّهُ, said his seat embraces كُرْسِيُّهُ وَسَعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ. His seat embraces the heavens and the earth. A question of the same type was asked about the arsh, and the reply was given that the encompassing was not as a material thing encompasses another material thing. So it's now clear, after all those certainly discussions and questions, it's now clear that Kursi and arsh are not material things, are not physical beings. Now, let's see what's the difference between arsh and Kursi. From Hannan ibn Sadir, he says, I asked Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq about the throne and the seats. So what are they? What is the difference? He said, indeed, the throne has many diverse attributes. Allah uses in the Quran various adjectives to describe its various aspects. He says, and he's the Lord of the great throne, وَهُوَ رَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْعَظِيمِ, at the end of Surah At-Tawbah. The Lord of great, it means the Lord of great kingdom or authority. And he says, the all beneficent settled on the throne. Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa, in Surah At-Taha. It means that he is firm in his kingdom and is the knowledge of the how of the things. Now, this is fabulous. I mean, you can never find this knowledge anywhere else. This knowledge is inherited by the A'imma from the Prophet, peace be upon him. It is that sort of knowledge which is reserved for as-Siddiqeen. That's why you cannot find such explanation in any other hadith or from coming from the sources other than from Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam or any other book. Also, the throne, he continued, Imam alayhi salam, is distinct from the seats because they are two of the greatest doors of the unseen, and they both are the unseen. Both the arsh and the kursi are unseen. They are not physical things, and they are together in the unseen because the seat is the manifest door of the unseen from which appears creation and from which all things come. And the throne is the concealed doors of the unseen in which is found the knowledge of the states, conditions, and existence, of measure and limit, of will and intention, as well as the knowledge of words, actions, and omissions, and the knowledge of the beginning and the return. Now imagine Allah was to issue creation, the creation. Now we have this, imagine this is Kursi, this is Arsh, and this is Kursi. This door, Arsh, faces God, and the Kursi faces the creation. These are two gates of the unseen. Things are issued from the Arsh, coming to the Kursi. The Arsh is where Allah without any mediation, issues his commands and his creation. So that's why it says, Ar-Rahman al-arsh istawa. He is settling on the throne. Don't take it physical, okay? And this is facing God. This is facing the creation. The creation has measure, has size, has duration, has limit, and everything. So whatever comes out of Kursi comes in measure, comes in size and things like that. However, where these things are destined, the size of things, the duration of things, this is made the decision is made from the arsh, coming to the Kursi. And it's a sort of process. It's a sort of production line in which the design comes from the arsh and the product comes from the Kursi. Look what the hadith says. They are together in the unseen. Certainly, the Kursi is above the seen world, is about the physical world, is about the angelic world. They're all from real unseen, okay? But from it issues the creation, angelic creation, physical creation, the creation of the universe, you and everything. But they are together in the unseen because the seed is the manifestor of the unseen. So, yes, the Kursi is facing the creation, from which appears creation and from which all things come. The throne is the concealed doors of the unseen. It's ghaib. Okay? Now, the knowledge of the states, conditions, wujud, existence, measures, limits, will, intention, they're all decided there and then is materialized in Kursi in terms of creation and is issued. So it's the knowledge of the beginning of the creation and the return of the creation when, of course, everything returns back to him. wilāytullāh al-Nūr. Thus, the Imam continues, the two are two gates of knowledge joined together. Both are doors of knowledge authority, because the dominion of the throne is other than the dominion of the seat. They are very different. And its knowledge, the knowledge of the throne, is more hidden than the knowledge of the seat. It's where the concepts are made. And here where the concepts are made into things. So, and the knowledge, and its knowledge is more hidden than the knowledge of the seed. That's why Allah said, and He's the Lord of the great throne, Rabbul arsh al-Azim, because its attribute is greater than that of the seed, and both are joined in it in that Ghaibul Ghuyub. This narration is fabulous in the depth of knowledge that it conveys, something that cannot be found anywhere else but with the Holy Family. I assure you, go and search every book other than what has come from the Holy Family. Things which come from other sources. See if you can find this. You may say, hasn't Prophet, peace be on him, explained these things so that those narrations which go up to the prophets from other sources than Holy Family would narrate it? Well, the Prophet may have explained them, but it doesn't mean that people understood it. It was the Imams, alayhimus salam, who could understand and explain these things. The statement, the seed is the manifest door of the unseen, may be understood in the light of the seed representing the level of the knowledge of measured things nearer to our material world, whereas the throne represents infinite knowledge which has no limits. We cannot imagine, of course, anything without limits. We cannot imagine anything without boundaries. That is a realm which belongs to the realm of arsh. That is the realm of what is mentioned in Surah Al-Hijr, وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا عِندَنَا خَزَائِنُهُ وَمَا نُنَزِّلُهُ إِلَّا بِقَدَرٍ مَعْلُومٍ. There is not a thing but that its sources are with us, khaza'in. However, we reduce it, we dilute it, نُنَزِّلُهُ, send it down. When it becomes creation, it comes with no measure. So what is in Allah, in the arsh, what is issued from the arsh has no measure. When it comes to the Kursi, it finds measure, and it finds the creation. As I said, because our mind is not actually set to understand limitless things, we cannot understand what is arsh. How suddenly design comes about, and how suddenly that design finds measure, we cannot understand that. But anyhow, just being amazed of it is pleasant. Okay, enough of Kursi. Now, here we have the next statement, وَلَا يَؤُدُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا. He's not wearied by their preservation. Ya'uduhu is from aud, which means to tire or weigh down. Although the pronoun hu, wala ya'uduhu, after ya'udu, is generally taken to refer to God. Wala ya'uduhu hifzuma. It means that the preservation of them would not weary God, isn't it? But we may understand in a different way as well. Wala ya'udul kursi hifzuhuma. The preservation of them would not tire the Kursi. That is an, of course, acceptable meaning as well. However, usually we understand the zamir, the pronoun go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anyhow, it's the same thing. La ya'udul Kursi means la ya'udul God. So, وَلَا يَعُدُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا. He is not wearied by their preservation. It may be equally correct to associate the pronoun to the seed and read it as the seed is not wearied by their preservation, as I mentioned. As said before, God is the only true independent reality, and all else is constantly perishing unless preserved by Him. So whether the hifzuhuma goes back to Kursi, Kursi is preserved by Him. If it goes back to Allah, of course, everything is preserved by Allah. The relationship of God to His creation is like that of a thinker to his thoughts, or the sun to his rays, and not that of a builder to a building. Why? It says, La ya'uduhu hifzuhuma. Because the creation needs constant preservation. The wujudul mumkin, the contingent being, needs constant preservation by the necessary being. It's not the case, for example, like the example of the watchmaker, that Allah has created a huge and perfect watch and it's working perfectly. It's not like, for example, our relation to a building, the relation of a builder to a building is that after it's built, it can stand on its own. It doesn't need to be preserved by the builder. The builder may die, the building is there. However, the creation or the contingent being needs constant preservation. Kullu shay'in halikun. Everything is perishing constantly, except if it's connected, directed to Him. Illa wajhahu. Wajh means jah, direction. Everything is perishing. So Allah has, if we want to give an example, I mean, This is not a perfect example, but the example is, for example, even our body, even we can exist without our body. Even our body can exist without our soul. I mean, exist in the terms of what, although it's dead, but it's there. But to give a sort of closer example, our imagination, the thoughts which come to our mind, if we do not think them, they perish. If we divert our attention from them, they do not exist. As I said, this is not a perfect example, but the example of creation and Allah is like that. It needs constant preservation. And that's why he says, because one may think that, wow, this really needs great power to be preserved. Wouldn't God be tired of that? No. وَلَا يَؤُدُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا. Creation cannot therefore be imagined to exist on its own without the Rabbul Alameen, one who constantly sustains the universe. He's not varied, is mentioned because man immediately tries to understand what he hears or reads it in terms of his own experience. Anthropomorphism always comes to our mind. Constant preservation of a thing, even if it's just a thought, would tire and exhaust man. But God does not rely on a physical body or any medium to preserve or maintain what he creates, isn't it? And therefore, yes, certainly, God is not like man to be tired. Even if you want to think about something constantly, you become tired. But do not compare God with yourself. Now, the ending sentence of the verse, وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ, is a justification of whatever went before that. All exalted, all supreme. Now, Azim and Kabir both mean great. However, Azim is translated as all supreme here because Azama is related to the Azama of his creation. But Kabir relates to his own greatness. The all-exalted Al-Ali is literally the Most High, but since God is not above or at any fixed location, its meaning is that he is too exalted and high to be comprehended by any of his creation. Like Kabir, great. Of course, greatness means that we want to compare something. When we say Allahu Akbar, now let's come to this. Akbar means greater, isn't it? Kabir means great, but Akbar means greater. Can we say Allah is Akbar or A'azam? Because when it comes to Akbar, it means we are comparing him to something else. And especially if we say A'azam, A'azam is comparison with physical things. Now, that's why they say Akbar doesn't mean greater per se. It means greater to be described. Allahu Akbaru min an yusaf. So here, when we say is Ali, it means it's above every thought, above every comprehension in terms of his knowledge, his power. When we say, وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Have you ever pondered on this? A being which can do anything. How? How is it? What sort of being is he? How is he able to do anything, everything? وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So he's really supreme and above everything. And that's why our connection to him is not easy. At the end of Surah Shura, we have this verse that's وَكَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ روحا من أمرنا ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب ولا الإيمان ولكن جعلناه نورا نهدي به من نشاء من عبادنا. But before that, there's this verse. It talks about Quran, but before that it says, how do I connect with human beings? وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَن يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا. It's not possible for a human being to be communicated by God إِلَّا وَحْيًا أو من وراء حجاب أو يرسل رسولا فيوحي بإذنه ما يشاء وهو العلي الحكيم. إنه هو Now, maybe I'm just not giving the exact sentence of the verse, but at the end he says, he's Ali and Hakim. Ali, first of all, you cannot communicate with God, any human being, except if it's just something thrown in their heart by Allah. This is wahya. أو من وراء حجاب, they hear a sound, a voice, but they cannot see God. أو يرسل رسولا, or sends an angel, a messenger from the angels to reveal things to them. Why? Because he's Aliyul Hakim. He's very high. That's why it's not possible for him to be communicated by any human being. وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَن يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا أَوْ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ أَوْ يُرْسِلَ رَسُولًا فَيُوحِيَ بِإِذْنِهِ مَا يَشَاءُ, because he is very high, Ali. The All Supreme Al-Azim, another of God's beautiful names, is also an exaltation of God as being too great and mighty to be fathomed by anyone or anything. But when we say Azim, is Azama, because Azama usually have this sort of tint of physical greatness. That's why in Hadith, the Imam alayhi salam has explained that his Azama is only understood by the greatness of his creation. We know his Azama by the greatness of his creation. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. And inshallah, Allah will help us to comprehend these high teachings, deep knowledge of the Quran by the help of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, as they are the partners of the Quran. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.